We're going to do another contemplation together. And this contemplation, it has been briefly mentioned, is called the 5 daily recollections. These are the words the Buddha used for that. And the meaning is clear. We need to recollect these 5 things every day. And we'll try and get them so embedded in our memory that we won't forget to do that. It's usual and common that people don't pay any attention to them at all, only when it hits them. And then of course it's too late, because then they're considered tragedies. The first 3 are decay, disease, and death. The impermanence of this person. And we need to take a very distinct look at that. It doesn't just mean that we get life-threatening diseases, or particularly it doesn't mean that we have been thinking wrongly and that's why we get sick. Doesn't mean that at all. The Buddha also got sick and died. And it's hard to imagine that he was thinking wrongly. And any number of examples we can look at even in this century. Ramana Maharshi, whom I mentioned earlier, as an enlightened sage in southern India, died of cancer. And so did the Karmapa, and so did Ramakrishna, if those names are known to you. The body is one thing. And that is not only what this concerns. Dis-ease means also unease. It's a very clear word in English. And physical unease, it can be as healthy and as young as you like. Physical unease, all you have to do is sit 3 times for 3/4 hour and you know all about it. It's very simple. The body has its own life, and that is quite distinct. And not only that, but it's a material thing. Just like a house. And houses deteriorate and eventually fall to pieces. It's a matter of time. Oceans deteriorate and disappear. And today we've got valleys and mountains that might have been oceans. Stars deteriorate. All we see is the light, which probably emanated from them like 30,000 light years ago, and they're long gone. Why shouldn't we deteriorate? There's no reason for that at all. It doesn't have any logical explanation. That's the way it is. But the way it is, we need to come to terms with it in a way which makes it a natural passage. Just as it is a natural passage. And most people in the world are very much set against this natural passage of decay, disease, and death. They like to find ways and means which counteract all that. Which is not to say that we shouldn't take medicines when we're sick. The Buddha himself advocated that, and one of the most favored medicines in his day was urine. And is still being used in many of the forest monasteries in the Buddhist countries. It's probably not as quickly effective as antibiotics, but it's supposed to have antibiotics in it. So there's no saying about this that we don't take medicine when the body is sick, but we need to come to terms with the fact that this is the way it is, and not to expect otherwise. And whether we live 30, 20, 40, 100, 150 years, what's the difference? It's all a passing show. And if you can think for a moment, would you actually like to live 500 or 1,000 years? I mean, the thought alone is already gruesome. Never mind if it were to happen. There are stories about that, sort of fairy tales, where this was possible for someone, and the results were dreadful for that person. We live in a completely changing aspect from moment to moment, not only physical, of course, mental too. And this change is very much to be accepted, but also it has a connotation of ease about it. Because just imagine that you were sitting in meditation, your body is aching, and your mind is totally unhappy about the lack of concentration, and nothing would change. I mean, it's not only dismal, it's tragic. But of course, not only that changes, everything changes. And because everything changes constantly, there is a certain outgoingness in us where we fail to see what's going on inside. Because there's so many changes going on. The weather, the seasons, the sun, the stars, the moon, the rain, our thoughts, our feelings, everything is constantly changing. So there is so much that we take in that we forget to look in. And this is what we do in contemplation. We try to look in. I like you to think of meditation as a bridge from the worldly to the transcendental. The worldly level is a level of purification, and we have done twice already the contemplation of on the purification of the emotions. That's a worldly level. That's where, when we are able to do this, we have a far easier life. Everything is far smoother. It's the oil in the machinery. But it's a worldly level. Now, meditation itself is also not super mundane. It's a bridge between the worldly and the transcendental. It enables the mind to see different levels or experience different levels of consciousness. And the transcendental, supermundane level is the level of insight. Now, when we do the contemplation on decay, disease, and death, and there are two more, one is karma, we can use the worldly level, and we should use that, because obviously this body that we have, which is decaying every moment and gets unease and dis-ease and will die, is on the worldly level. But we can also see this on a more subtle level, namely, whatever is born must die. And that was the final solution that the Buddha found. The final solution, which is called Nibbana, and which has embedded in it the experience of dissolving into the matrix of existence, where there is no separation and where there's no rebirth necessary. And when there's no rebirth, there can be no re-death. That we're all going to die this time around, I think we can take that for granted. I don't think we need to discuss it. But we have possibilities. And the first one of those possibilities for acceptance and ease of mind is to recognize the fact that there's nothing threatening in death. It's part of life. Now there's another way of looking at death, and many other ways. I'll just mention another one for the contemplation purpose. Namely, we die every second. The thought is gone. The feeling is gone. It takes a second or two. And our bodies, all the cells, are constantly dissolving and rearranging themselves. So there is a moment-to-moment death. If we want to look at death in that way, that also is helpful to recognize truth. But it should never deter us from looking at death as losing this person that we think we are, that particular person whom we now consider ourselves to be, will never reappear. This is it. And that should bring about what in Pali is called samvega, urgency, to practice now. And that urgency to practice can only have any effect each moment, this moment. So any moment that we use for recognizing ourselves in a more distinct way and not shying away from the things which are so obviously true, and not sticking our heads in the sand because we don't want to know about them, but seeing them for what they are, the passage, first from birth to death, and then death itself. The difficulty that everybody experiences with death is the fact that one thinks, I am going to be annihilated. I'm going to be finished. Well, there we need to have a bit of an insight into the fact that there was nobody there to start out with. And nobody can be annihilated. We're just having a passage. We're a guest performer. And on the worldly level, we try to perform in a pure and purified way. And then realize that any guest performance has got to finish. Nobody can be a guest forever. People consider death a tragedy. Actually, it's the other way around. It's release. And if it's done the right way, one should never extend one's condolences. If death has been usefully applied, one should congratulate the person who has done so. There's nothing threatening about it. There's no threat involved in dying to one's thoughts and feelings, and even the body functions moment to moment. There's no threat involved in having a day finish, falling asleep, which is also momentary death. Nobody feels very threatened by that. In fact, most people don't feel threatened by it at all. And yet, the whole day from morning to night is just in a microcosm the whole life. That's all it is. And as we can see that way, we will probably be able to live far less anxiously. Because our fears are all connected with not being here. We're not constantly having death fears. Some people never think about death. But our fears are also concerned with not measuring up, not gaining our goals, not being appreciated. These are fears, these are anxieties. They might not show themselves as being very much afraid, but they're certainly anxieties. And all of that is exactly the same fear of not being that certain person that we think we are. So that's why in practically every spiritual discipline, death is a very important contemplation subject. And in the order of Saint Benedict, in whose monastery we are finding ourselves at this moment, it's one of the rules. It's got many rules. I don't know if he's got quite as many as the Buddha, but he's got plenty. To look at one's own death every day. And if you've been to the church, there are some peculiar, which is putting it mildly, peculiar looking skeletons in glass cases. They're actually from the Roman times. The Christian martyrs and the Vatican give them to this monastery. They're all decked out in jewels and some very decorative headdresses and things like that. Well, they are there to remind those who really practice that nothing can be important enough to get fearful, worried, or angry or resistant about. We're only here as a guest. And as we are here as a guest performer, we should of course not only try to do the best performance we can, which most people do try, but they have an idea what this performance should be like. They've written the script themselves, and they have also made up a certain idea what this script is supposed to accomplish. And since we've got many, many guest performers on earth at the same time, they clash, because they all want to be, of course, the main actor or main actress. What else? Nobody wants a supporting role. And yet, we have a stage which is around us, and we all think, of course, we are in the middle of the stage, and the more in the middle we get, the better we feel. And then all the other people are just having these supporting roles, and if they don't support the main actor, that's tragic. It's a matter for enmity. Well, naturally. That's the way we live. Not quite successfully, but that's how it happens all the time. Now, some people are more able to step back into the background a little. Some of them quite willingly, when it becomes an escape mechanism, which also doesn't work. Some step back because they actually know it's not quite as important to be in the middle. And some do it because it's their tendency to do it, which is also all right. But when it's an escape mechanism, it doesn't work either. Because what are we escaping from? There's no way to escape. We're born and we're going to die. And on the way there, we have opportunities. Opportunities for spiritual growth, opportunities for deep perspectives, for widening horizons, but we've got to let go of fear. Only if we let go of fear is the mind clear and open enough to have totally new thought and understanding processes enter. As long as it's beset by fear, and anyone who is faced with the idea that death is an annihilation of self has fear of it. So as long as we have any fear at all, then the mind doesn't have enough spaciousness in it to accept the new. So what this contemplation also aims for is to reduce our fears, to see all these natural happenings in their truth perspective, so that we can actually live each moment without trying to think of how many more we've got. Actually, we haven't got any anymore, because these are boundaries which we have made ourselves. All this business with clocks and days and calendars, these are all boundaries we have made. And they are, on a worldly level, utilitarian. We need them, otherwise we don't know what time to go somewhere. So it's very important to have that. But they don't have any reality. The only reality which is possible to experience is to live in the moment. And if we do that, we will experience eternity, because there's no boundary to the moment. One moment and then there's another moment. And if we live in each one, then we haven't made a division between what was, what will be, and what possibly is. That division are the boundaries, man-made boundaries. And they are always creating fear, because we know very well, subconsciously most likely, or even consciously, that we have made up all these things ourselves. We've made up the future. It's not true. We're making it up. So we're afraid it won't work out that way. And most likely it won't. Because the person who's making the future up, who's having all these ideas about it, is not going to be the same one that's going to experience the future. So it's highly likely that whatever we make up will never happen, whether it's on the positive or negative side. But living in this moment now, that's eternal. And it can have no boundaries, because it encompasses the whole experience of being here now. Now we try to learn that in meditation, and I will talk about it more in the context of mindfulness. And maybe that will be helpful. But the main thing is to practice. There's no substitute for practice. We can think and think and think and think, and we can disagree or we can agree, but it's no substitute. It's got to be done. When we do it, we call that biting into the mango. We know what it tastes like. And if we want to really experience a totally different reality from the one that is constantly being offered to us through our own mind and through the minds of all the people that we contact, and experience a reality which has ease and flow in it, we've got to learn letting go of fear, fear for self. And that's our main fear. Fear for ourselves. And sometimes people think, no, it's all right for me to die, just so my children don't die. Well, if it's all right for me to die, then it's all right for everyone to die. That is a basic fear. So that's one thing that we can work at, and the other one is to seeing the moment, how it dies, and we don't have to think of all the things that will come or not come. This is it. Living in the ease of the moment-to-moment experience makes it possible not to be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. We're just here now. And that is actually a wonderful and most heartening understanding that we can have if we experience it. We're going to do the contemplation in the same way we've done the other one. I will say the sentence and you will repeat it after me, and then I will say something about it to help with the contemplation.